Welcome into Between the Lines, a summer series episode, and today we're going to be going into our top 20 players in the NBA, and we're going to be giving you our players ranked 11 through 20. Previously, we just did an episode that showed our rankings from 21 to 30, so now we're getting up into the top 20 here. And just for reference, this is recorded on July 1st, so obviously if there's any moves going on in the NBA, we're not going to be like referencing those and any teams players might be on. And this is going to be this is going to be for rankings going into next season. So we're going to start at 20. So Tish, why don't you give us your 20th best player in the NBA going into next season?
All right, so starting off my list at number 20, I'm gonna have Scotty Barnes, the young buck over in Toronto. I think he really took a big step this year. I mean, he's had a pretty solid start to his career. Like he won Rookie of the Year back in 2022, and ever since then, he's continuously like improved his game in different aspects. I think this year, especially, we saw like his first playoff basketball minutes, and he played amazingly. He pretty much his stats jumped up to 24, 9, and 6, and the one problem throughout his career in terms of offense has been like his ability to just like create shots for himself. He's always been a good facilitator, very physical player. He's even got like some like Giannis 2.0 comparisons. Obviously not the same build and everything, but just like that aggressiveness that a lot of people, including me, like about him. And so we saw him get a lot more to the basket this year, especially in the playoffs. So I think he's got a lot of momentum to build on for next year. He was all defense this year as well, and it was pretty much consensus that like he was robbed of being first team. Derek White kind of robbed him. So very good defender, averaged 3 stocks as well. So just probably one of the most exciting young up and coming young players that I think if he just continues to work on developing a shot for himself, he can really become like one of the premier players in this league. So I'll have Scotty Barnes at number 20.
All right, so Scotty Barnes is going to be coming up in a little bit for me on my list. But for my number 20 spot, I'm going to have Denny Avdia, a guy that you had in the previous rankings between 21 and 30 for you. A guy that really took a new role in his career and a new role within the Trailblazers starting this year. Just playing really great basketball and showing that he can be the lead guy and like the lead ball handler and the lead offensive initiator for a team. So obviously a team that this upcoming year they're going to have Damian Lillard returning from his injury. They just traded for John Morant, so he's going to take some minutes too. So it's unsure what his role is going to be going into this new team, especially with the new construct they have with the differences in the backcourt and things like that. But he's shown that he can definitely be the lead ball handler for a team. Just going over his like stats from this past season. This was the best year of his entire career. He obviously made the All Star team. A jump from 16.9 points per game in the 24-25 season all the way up to 24.2 points per game this season, and not too much of a drop in his efficiency. Sometimes we see a lot of players that when they have an increase in their point total, sometimes their efficiency can drop. He only dropped by 1% in his field goal percentage, dropping from 47 to 46%, and 46% from the field, still being pretty good. Shooting 31.8% from field, so about 32%. You'd like to see that increase a little bit, but his free throw rate was something that a lot of people talked about in terms of the sense like, is he a free throw merchant or things like that? Obviously, a lot of like jokes like surrounding that, but he is able to get to the line at a really good rate. And he's able to add that to his scoring. We saw him play a really good game against the Suns in the play-in game, and was able to lead them into the playoffs against the Spurs. Obviously, in the game three, that was probably the biggest pivotal game for them in that Spurs series. He wasn't able to get the job done and get that win there. A 2-1 lead with no Wemby in that game would have been really significant for them, but he gets outplayed by Dylan Harper in that game. That's just something you'd like to see him play a little bit better in the postseason from now on, but I'm interested to see how he plays going into this next season with the Blazers. So I'm going to have Denny Avdia at 20 for me.
Moving up to number 19 now, I'm going to have Jalen Johnson, someone that you obviously had in your rankings in the last episode. I think just like similar to Scotty Barnes, one of the most exciting young players coming out of Duke. He's pretty much just like does it all type of player for his team. He averaged 23, 10, and 8. One of the candidates for like most improved, very well deserved. And I think one of the underrated aspects of his game that's improved this season was he's always been known as not the greatest shot taker and shot maker on offense. He's more of like a creator and uses his like physicality as one of the best power forwards in the game. But he hasn't really ever had much of a jumper. But this year, his 3-point shooting percentage increased a lot to now 35% from three, and it's on good volume. It's on roughly 5 threes a game. So I really like the way that Jalen Johnson's kind of turned his career not that he ever had a rough like patch in his career, but he's just young. He's finding ways to improve. And similar to Scotty Barnes, I think he can, if he continues to work on his like shot creation for himself, that'll be one way he can improve his game because we kind of saw in the first round playoff series against the Knicks where the Hawks kind of at times stagnated on offense because Jalen Johnson, he has the ball in his hands and he's good playmaking, but he wasn't the best at creating shots for himself. It was really on like the 34-year-old CJ McCollum to do that. So I think Jalen Johnson, if he just continues to create shots for himself, he's already great at making shots for his teammates. He's only going to get better and can make this like young and up and coming Hawks team a serious threat down the line. So I'm gonna have Jalen Johnson at 19.
So at my number 19 spot, I'm gonna go with Kevin Durant, easy money sniper. I think he's a guy that he's probably decreased in like most people's rankings just like consecutively over the last couple of years, just based on how his last couple stops haven't really worked out how he's thought it has most of the public probably thought those stops were going to work out. At least a few of them probably people thought they were going to result in championships. I think mainly the Brooklyn Nets spot people thought that was going to result in one. Maybe the Phoenix Suns one very early on, and no one really considered that the Rockets were going to be a championship contender or win the championship right away. But at least people thought they might be able to have a deep playoff run or at least contend with the Thunder or the Spurs by the end of the season for like being right there in that Western Conference Finals area, and they weren't able to do that. Part of why his ranking has dropped for me, like dropped from like the top 10, like into this like lower teens and getting close to like dangerously close to getting into the 20s, is part of the leadership aspect. I've never been a big fan of Kevin Durant as a leader, like over his entire career. He's shown that repeatedly. He doesn't want to be the leader, but part of being the best player on a team, the most skilled and talented player on a team, is being the leader because a lot of people are going to tend to look at you on the team and just be like, okay, you're the go-to guy, especially in the clutch moments. You're the guy that we're giving the ball to. You're the guy that has the ball in their hands at the last second. So you have to be the leader in those moments, and we want you to be the leader off the court too in the locker room. And obviously, he hasn't been able to do that. Obviously, there was this scandal this year with the whole burner account and everything like that, and just that's just showing another case of where he isn't able to be a guy that his teammates can look up to, and he's looking to be the guy, and he's looking to become the guy that's just like trashing down and talking down on his teammates and things like that. In terms of numbers, he was obviously really efficient this season, like he always is. 26 points per game, shooting 52% from the field and 41 or sorry, 52% from the field and then 41% from three. So obviously those are great numbers, and relative to how he's been in the rest of his career, that aren't like that. That's not like a really significant drop or anything like that. So he still has the numbers to back up his game, which is obviously incredible. But I just like to see more in the leadership aspect from him, and I guess we'll see how that happens next year on the Rockets again. So Kevin Durant's going to be up in the 19th spot for me.
Yeah, Kevin Durant's going to be 18 for me. Pretty similar range as you. I think you mentioned a lot of the main points about him. I think it just at this point in his career, pretty much actually throughout his entire career, it's never been a question of his individual performance. Like we saw him average 25 plus points per game on 52% from the field for now every single season since he joined the Warriors in 2017. Just like ridiculous efficiency. That's never been the question with him. It's just been, can he lead a team? We haven't been able to see him do that. Obviously, the off the court problems have been well documented, especially this year with the burner. We saw at the All-Star game how that turned out. But even like in terms of on the court, where we see that now the league is kind of transitioning to these like point forwards with Jalen Johnson. I mean, LeBron kind of paved the way, but now the younger guys with Jalen Johnson, Scotty Barnes. Kevin Durant hasn't really been able to develop that playmaking aspect of his game. We saw in the Rockets series, even in the regular season against the Lakers, where anytime that Kevin Durant had the ball, the Lakers would blitz him, and he'd have a lot of turnovers. He even had like 8 turnover games against them, so pretty concerning. So I think at this point in his career, it's also for the first time he might not even be that highly desired by a lot of teams. I think for his case, if he the best situation might just be to stay with the Rockets and make it work out because coming into the Rockets like this year seemed like a pretty good situation. Really young core, he can come in and be that mentor for them. Didn't really work out. So we'll just see what happens. You know, as he's aging, his durability is getting a little worse. We saw him play only one game in that Lakers series due to the knee injury. So I think just because of these factors, a guy who was pretty unanimously a top 10, top 12 player in the league is now a little bit lower for both of us. For me, number 18.
Yeah, so in my number 18 spot, it's going to be the guy that was across the court from him in that one playoff game against the Lakers. Is going to be LeBron James. Obviously, another guy that I think has diminished overall just in his ranking. Obviously, like if you went back like 5 years or so, LeBron would definitely be in like the top five of most people's rankings, like definitely in the top 10 for sure. He's dropped a little bit and completely the opposite for the reason that Kevin Durant. Like obviously his leadership is still there, and I still want him as a guy that's like leading my teams. People like some guy a guy you would describe as like a foxhole type guy. You would want him in the playoffs. If you're down in a series, you want him there. He's one of the best leaders in the game, one of sports in general. But But the reason that he's this low on the list is because of his numbers have sacrificed a little bit, and that's nothing due to his play or anything like that, or like anything he's doing intentionally. It's just because of his age, obviously, being 41 years of age. He's about to go into his, I think, 23rd season or some crazy number like that. So he's obviously a guy that's just reached an age where you can't rely on him to be like the number one guy in a championship team anymore. And we know, as of today's recording, we know he's not going to be on the Lakers anymore. We're unsure of what his next team is going to be, who he's going to sign with in free agency. He's expressed interest in like all 29 teams in the NBA. He just wants to be able to compete for a championship. It looks like, because it looks like financial contract wise, it's not like the main thing that he's looking for. So he could sign a minimum deal for a team, which would be really nice that he could get another ring that way. But I just don't think he's going to be able to be the number one player on a championship team anymore, which isn't saying like a crazy amount about a 41-year-old. And for the fact that a 41-year-old could be the second best player or third best player on a championship team and providing quality minutes in a playoff is still really important. So for me, LeBron's going to be at number 18.
It looks like we got some like in sync action going on here because I got LeBron at number 17. Again, like very well stated by you. It really, it just due to age, he's going to be, we've seen his defense kind of decline, his stamina go down. This year, he had some injury concerns throughout the year. So his high, like IQ is still at an all-time high. His playmaking is still not a question, averaging 7 assists a game, playing very well. But I think at this point in his career, we're going to see where he ends up. The big four in Golden State, we'll see if that happens or not, if it's even a big four, but we'll see where he ends up. I think he's still a meaningful contributor on a championship team, but he's definitely not that first option that he once was. He's definitely going to take more of a athletic backseat and be more like the playmaker, use the IQ to kind of facilitate an offense versus rather being the offense, being the main bucket getter. So we'll see what happens for LeBron here in year 24. But let's move on to year number 17.
Yeah, so my number 17 guy is a guy that you mentioned at the beginning of this video, Scotty Barnes. I'm not going to go too much more in depth because you mentioned almost all of it. As of this time of recording, we know Kawhi Leonard is going to be traded back from the Los Angeles Clippers to the Toronto Raptors. So I think that's a great pairing for Scotty Barnes, having another like star, like one of those like large forward types alongside him. And it's going to take a little bit of the offensive responsibility off of his shoulders. So it's going to allow Scotty Barnes, I think, to play a little bit better. He can probably be a little bit more efficient from the field, get better looks from the field. And I think that's going to help him as a player. Obviously, Kawhi Leonard is a player that's probably going to show up in both of our lists, maybe a little bit further on in this video or when the top 10 video. So I think there's obviously a reason that like the Raptors went out to get him, because you don't think Scotty Barnes can really be that number one guy, but he's more than qualified to be the number two guy. And obviously you mentioned everything with his abilities and like how he's trying to like use some of his athletic traits and become like a better offensive player, just an overall offensive engine. And we know he possesses the defensive capabilities too. So that's going to put him at number 17 for me.
Now moving to number 16, I'm gonna have Karl Anthony Towns. I think that he's really just, he shut a lot of the haters down this year, especially in terms of physicality. I mean, we've seen like the viral picture of him posting up like DeMarcus Cousins, where ever since then, pretty much it's always been the question of, is Cat meant to be a physical big in this league? Should he play it more like a stretch four? What is Karl Anthony Towns? What's his role in this league? Well, now everyone has to shut up. He's an NBA champion. He proved his versatility. We saw him like almost out of nowhere just unlock this like playmaking bag where he was getting triple doubles in the playoffs against the Hawks in their closeout game 6, especially. So I just really like the way he's kind of transcended his game into, of course, still having like his excellent 3-point shot in an argument for probably the greatest 3-point shooting big of all time after a guy like Dirk Nowitzki. But I just like the way he's developed his game. He kind of shut down the physicality haters. He's also underratedly been very durable, especially with the Knicks. He's had some injury concerns like earlier in his career with the Timberwolves, but with the Knicks, and it's now 2 years in a row where he's played 70 plus games. So I think he's pretty much cemented himself as the third best center in the league behind Victor Wembanyama and Jokic, who will definitely be in our top 10 later on. But I like what Cat's doing in his career. We'll see what the Knicks do, because we saw today Mitchell Robinson go to the Celtics and Ariel Hookporty joined the Sixers. So they have some center depth issues, but Cat's definitely a high quality starting center in this league and borderline top 15 player in my eyes. I'm going to have him number 16.
Yeah, exactly. And just so everyone knows, like we didn't talk about these lists beforehand, but
Not
I
at all.
literally have Cat at 16 as well. So there's no point like me saying too much. You said everything I was gonna say. I obviously proved a lot of people wrong with winning a championship this year. I was really happy for him. Obviously, this championship that means a lot to him. And he played great, and he seems to have gotten that monkey off his back, so to speak, of like people doubting him as a champion. So yeah, Cat's gonna be at 16 for me also.
Yeah, good for Cat. Definitely one of the most likable guys in the league. So now we're going to enter our top 15s here. And I have someone who was mentioned in the last episode at Tyrese Halliburton. It's interesting. He was once voted the most overrated player in the league. And then with that finals run, I think like he shut up a lot of the haters. And We saw this year just his impact is truly tremendous, where the Pacers won 19 games without him. Of course, there were other players injured for the Pacers as well. We saw like Benedict Mathurin get traded. Zubac, who was received in that trade, didn't play many games for the Pacers. So I'm not saying that the Pacers were only missing Halliburton, which is why they only won 19 games, but he's clearly one of those just absolutely impactful point guards that it's not too common seeing that combination of three-point shooting and playmaking in the league right now. Let's see if he gets back to his like double double averages that he's had in previous years of like 18 and 10, 19 and 10, stuff like that. I'm excited to see what he does with Zubac. That one of the more underrated centers in terms of what's being asked of him from the Pacers. He'd definitely be like a lob threat, someone to establish a paint presence, which was kind of a problem for the Pacers in that finals run against the Thunder, where we saw Miles Turner kind of not really be able to be the most physical of bigs in the paint. So Zubac can help fix that. But I'm excited to see what Halliburton does. The reason I just have him at 15 is I guess I'm not taking the injury too much into account just because he's had a whole year to rehab from it. But at the same time, he could be someone that moves either a lot up the list or a lot down the list based on how he is after that Achilles tear. Definitely one of the most tough injuries to go through. We're going to see if he still has that high school basketball type of play style where you just run, like pass. Like, is he still going to be as explosive and agile? Let's see. But for now, I'm going to have Hallie at top 15.
So at my number 15 spot, I'm gonna have a different Tyrese. I'm going with Tyrese Maxey, the guard for the Philadelphia 76ers. He's a guy that I think has pretty clearly assumed the number one role on that team. Team surrounded. He has another great guard in VJ Edgecombe alongside him, but that's a guy that's probably like barely cracking like a top 75 or top 60 list. Another guy in Joel Embiid that has the talent to be in this list that we're doing like today in these episodes, but because of his injury concerns, I mean he's not in my list. Like spoiler alert, and I doubt he's going to be in your list. And then a guy in Paul George that probably is comfortably in like a 45 top 50 list, something like that. Still a good player, but not the great player that he was, and maybe the great player that the Sixers thought they were trading for. So I think it's pretty clear that Tyrese Maxey's taking the number one like role in this team, and he's definitely like lived up to that role. Obviously, in terms of offensive ability, he's an absolute speed demon, and he has like almost like the 2K badge. He has limitless range. Like he's really a guy that is becoming a really impossible to defend because of his ability to shoot the ball, especially from outside the arc, and then his ability to get into the lane and like go through traffic and get the ball up onto the rim, just create rim pressure all around, and it makes it easier for his other guys too. And he's starting to add the more of the playmaking bag to his thing too, right? So he's able to develop his game in an offensive way that I don't think a lot of people envisioned was possible for him coming into the league when he came in as a rookie. But he's really starting to show that side of him, that playmaking ability and everything like that, and increasing his scoring output and everything. Obviously, a guy that made the All NBA team this year, or third team All NBA, was an All Star this season. 28 points per game on 46% from the field, 36% from three. And like I mentioned with the assists, he's had a career high in assists in 6.6, almost 7 assists per game this season. So he's a guy that's really improved year over year, and I think he's really coming into that lead role for the Sixers overall. So Tyrese Maxey is going to be a 15 for me.
Yeah, we're really locked in today. I got Tyrese Maxey at 14. I think just to add like a few small points what you said, he's just one of the most exciting young players in the league. He's just so fun to watch, especially that duo, VJ Max, like both of them. They're really, really good to watch. And I think he's really elevated his game in a lot of ways, underratedly in terms of his playmaking, because we've seen him kind of be that high volume scorer. But the questions were surrounding like, can he become a playmaker? And up to 6.6 assists per game kind of proves a lot of people wrong. And I just hope that, the Sixers, for his sake, kind of they officially move on from like the process era. They get off of Embiid, potentially even Paul George. They could be a good mentor because I think a lot of the problems for this offense and this team in general has been they just have a lot of like instability in terms of offense. Is Embiid playing? Is he not? Is Paul George healthy? Is he doing PEDs? Is he not playing? Like what's going on? So despite all that, Maxey still averaged 28 points per game, led the league in minutes per game. He does have some like defensive concerns, but I feel like that's purely just because he's a little like quote unquote undersized at 6'2". So sometimes he can't really fight through screens, stuff like that. But he makes up for it with his speed and everything, being like elite at getting steals on the perimeter and stuff like that. So I'm excited to see what Maxey does. I hope the Sixers kind of get some more guard depth around him and VJ Edgecombe, move off of Embiid and officially make this Maxey's team and see what they can do in the East. But yeah, Maxey's gonna be 14 for me.
Yeah. So at my number 14 spot, I'm gonna have Devin Booker, shooting guard for the Phoenix Suns. He's a guy that I think everyone's perception of him is kind of like sort of flatlined over the last couple of years. I think obviously coming off that finals run in 2021, everyone was like, okay, this guy can definitely be the number one player in a championship team. He was surrounded by great role players in that team. Obviously, Mikal Bridges, DeAndre Ayton, and a guy that was his leading point guard in Chris Paul, but definitely not the star of that team. The star of that team was Devin Booker. Obviously, Chris Paul was just helping to set them up and everything. And I think over the last couple of years, some part of it is like not due to his own fault. Obviously, like Matt Ishbia, the new Suns owner, taking over, making some ill-advised trades. I would say definitely the Kevin Durant one, a move there that you would classify under that, and sort of stunting not necessarily development because he was already a developed player by then. I think he was definitely, and I think he's in his prime, maybe sort of reaching like towards the end of his prime now, but just like a not well constructed roster around him that made it hard for them to compete for championships, let alone championships. Like we weren't even able to make the playoffs in some years. So a guy in Devin Booker that he still made the All Star team this past year, 26 points per game, shooting percentage 45% from the field, 33% from three. The one thing I just noticed going through his stats when I was making my list is that in the last 2 years he shot 33% from the three in both those years. The previous seasons he was shooting like 38%, 35, 36. So he was getting close to like 40% in most of those seasons from three, but now he's really been dipping back down to close to 30% from three. And it's not for a lack of like shooting or anything like that. He's still shooting about 6 attempts per game. So it's just something that I've noticed that like I think maybe he needs to increase the 3 point shooting percentage a little bit, or like dial back on the amount of attempts he's taking and maybe get, because we know obviously he's great from the mid range and things like that. So do we want to see a little bit difference in the shot diet? But I obviously ultimately think like the entirety of the results of his every single season with the Suns is really going to be dependent on how the front office does with the moves and things like that. So I think it's not necessarily him dropping a little bit because of like any of his play. I think it's just like a lack of like what's been given around him for him to work with. But Devin Booker's going to be at the 14th spot for me.
All right, moving into the final three spots of our 11 through 20 rankings. At 13, I'm gonna have Jalen Brown, who kind of like proved his own like skill set this year. He is one of the best isolation scorers in the league, just fantastic at just like creating shots for himself, finding space and everything, and deservingly so. At one point, he was even in the MVP conversation this year. Ended up finishing sixth for MVP, but he's just been an incredible player, and we kind of saw what he can do whenever he has the keys to an entire team with Jason Tatum sidelined for the majority of this season. So I think he did develop himself. I think the reason that I have him outside maybe like the top 10 is I'd like to see him develop a bit more as a playmaker. I think what we've seen is like, especially in the playoffs, that Sixers series where it's at times, the offense can become a little slowed down when it's him in isolation because we see a lot of better like defensive sets and blitzing happen in the playoffs. So once he gets doubled, I don't think he's really on the tier of like a Shea or like a Luka or a Brunson, where even if they get doubled, they can play make their way out of it and find the open men. And so we saw that slow down the Celtics offense a lot in the playoffs, especially against the Sixers, where they had so many good, like young, fast guys that can blitz them. So I think what's holding him back from being a little higher, and again, he's still number 13, like very high, very respected in the league, is just if he develops a bit more playmaking, I'd consider it. But let's see what happens. Maybe he does find his way onto his own team. He gets traded to a team like the Clippers, or I don't know if the Clippers would do it now. I mean, they don't have any more capital realistically with that. Well, we'll see what happens. But Jalen Brown, does he stay in Boston? Does he team up with Jason Tatum again? Clearly not like a Robin to Jason Tatum's Batman anymore. They're both Batmans. They're both of that tier. Does he go get his own team on like the Nets, another team that's been rumored? We'll see what happens. But Jalen Brown's going to have the number 13 spot for me.
Yeah, so for my number 13 spot, I'm going to go with one of your guys, Donovan Mitchell, Spida. I think it's pretty clear that he's easily either the first or second best shooting guard in the league now. I think it's just him and Anthony Edwards. I'm pretty sure in the last couple of years, most people would have like Devin Booker in that spot for the number one, but I think it's pretty clear the two of them have taken over. For me, he's going to be in the second best shooting guard spot, and that puts him at 13 for me. Great season last year just in terms of his numbers, 27.9 points per game, shooting 48% from the field and 36% from three. So obviously good numbers and good efficiency. And I think his playmaking bag has increased a little bit in terms of, especially in the last couple of years with Cleveland and being having these two bigs on his team, these two bigs that are really good at like catching lobs and things like that and rolling to the rim off the pick and rolls and actions and things like that, and Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. So I think he's been given a good team around him, but obviously this team hasn't come through when it matters the most in the postseason. Obviously in this most recent postseason, they make it to the conference finals, which is good, and then they go from being up roughly like 20 points on the Knicks in game one, fourth quarter of game one, and then it leads to a sweep in that series. So it's just something, maybe you didn't expect them to win that series. I don't think anyone was going to pick them to win, but at least like have a more competitive series, win at least a game or two, maybe a couple of your home games in that series. But I think going into next season, I think we're still unsure on what the roster is going to look like in the full complex of it, because James Harden currently is opted out of the player option, but it looks like based on Shams reporting, he's just looking to negotiate a larger, longer term extension with the Cavs, which I guess that could make sense and that would be good for them. But when it comes to the playoffs, is that really the move you want to do? I think you have a guy in Donovan Mitchell that's able to carry a lot of the load in the postseason, and you can really like maybe weather having a bad James Harden game or having a few bad James Harden games. But I think it requires some of the other guys to step up too. So I think Donovan Mitchell, he's definitely shown, and I don't think putting him at this is like a sign of disrespect. I think it's just like he's sort of, especially with some of his like athletic limitations and things like that, just in terms of height. Obviously, he has a lot of athletic ability. We've seen that he's been in the dunk contest and everything. But just being like sort of a smaller guard and maybe a little bit not as good in the defensive end as some of the guys that are going to be ahead of him on the list, you have to sort of compensate that with the roster building. But we'll see what the Cavs front office does with that. So Donovan Mitchell is going to be at the 13th spot for me.
Moving to number 12, and I've someone we just mentioned a little earlier, Kawhi Leonard. I think that he pretty much, he just pretty much exploded this year. No one really saw this coming. He played arguably the best basketball since his 2019 season with the Raptors, and ironically, he's now going to be back on the Raptors next year. So we'll see how that turns out. But averaging nearly 28 points a game. He was in the MVP voting, like finished number seventh in MVP voting. Just a very good year for him all around. And underratedly this is also one of his most of like available years in a while. We obviously, the narrative with Kawhi has been, is he going to play? Is he not? How's the health concerns and everything? But we saw him play 65 games. He still did miss some time, but he did get the minimum. He played 65 games, played well. I think at this point, even when he is healthy, he's one of the best two-way players in the league, average roughly 2 steals a game. It's just the fact that when he's healthy, as a lot of basketball fans say, availability is the best ability at this point. I think with Kawhi Leonard being in his late 30s now, pretty much at the tail end of his career, I don't know how much we can rely on him to put up a healthy season for this young Raptors team. We're going to see what he can do. But that being said, he still has the ability to just be one of the best mid-range scorers in the league. Very physical 3, 4, whatever position you need him to play. And for that reason, I'm going to have him at number 12.
Same thing. We're going to be in lockstep. I got Kawhi Leonard at number 12 for me. I think obviously talent, if you just take the talent and take the availability out of it, he would be a lot higher on both of our lists. And we saw that last season when he was available, he was playing really well and playing at almost an MVP level. But like you said, availability is pretty important, especially in a game that has an 82 game long regular season, and you need to have 16 wins in the playoffs. But it's more than likely going to take like 25 to 30 games in those playoffs to get those wins. So he's just a guy that he's suffering a little bit from the injury aspect of it. We'll see if he can like maybe right the ship injury wise in Toronto. Can he load manage a little bit during the regular season like we've seen him do in the past and be healthy for a deep playoff run in the East? But we'll see. So Kawhi Leonard also at the 12th spot for me.
Okay, and then the last spot for today's video for number 11, I'm gonna have a guy who's probably been in probably the first time that I'd ever have him outside the top 10 in his career is Stephen Curry. I think this was pretty tough for who I'll reveal as my number 10 spot in the next video between 10 and 11, but I'm gonna put Curry at 11. Of course, he's the best shooter of all time. He just has insane gravity both on the ball and off the ball. One of the best shot creators of all time, just limitless range. Everyone knows the narrative with Steph Curry. I don't have to talk too much about that. I think just we've seen, especially this year, just like due to his age getting up there in the numbers, we've seen his like physicality decline, his physical health decline, where he had the runner's knee for a lot of time this year. So he ended up only playing 43 games on the season. And also, as he continues to get older, we see his defensive limitations continue to get a little more pronounced, where he's never been known as a defensive guy. It's kind of been a lot of point of focus for a lot of the critics in the past, but we've seen him improve his defensive ability. But just as he continues to age, we see him get like pulled out in the late game possessions when it's close due to his like being a liability on defense. Especially in the playoffs, we see teams try to force switches onto him, try to get him to be the main matchup on defense. So I think just as he continues to age, both in terms of his defense and health, I don't know if I can have him in the top 10 because he's going to be 38 next year, I believe. He's getting up there. It's already tremendous the fact that he's played this well. Still averaged 26.6 points per game last season on his limited games. I just don't know if I can rely on him being healthy to put him in the top 10, but definitely arguable to be in like plus minus like 2-3 spots. Could be like in the latter half of the top 10, but for now I'll put him at 11 to close off my list.
Yeah. So for my last spot for today's episode, the number 11 spot, I'm gonna have Jaylen Brown, a guy that you mentioned a little bit earlier on the list. I think I have him a little bit higher because I was just really impressed with obviously what he did this season. Obviously most of the season with Jason Tatum being sidelined with the Achilles injury. You mentioned a lot of the stats already, so I don't need to go through that again. But he played really well. Increased a lot of his scoring output, increased his rebounding output. Almost all of his counting totals output increased just this season, just by virtue of being like the leader on the team and just like the main offensive engine on the team. And I think he did play really well in that output in that spot. I don't think it was more like putting up all these stats, but it didn't lead to winning. Like no, it put up all the stats and then leading to the second seed in the East, putting up all these stats and leading to MVP votes. So I think he played a really good season overall, and I was really impressed with how he did in the absence of Jason Tatum during most of the season. Obviously, we're not sure what team he's going to even be on next season. It looks like there's a possibility he's not going to end up being on the Celtics just because of the relationship between him and the front office. They're seeming to fray a little bit due to the presence of him being in trade rumors and things like that. So we're not sure where he's going to play, but I do think wherever he ends up playing next year, he can definitely be the type of guy that's an overqualified number two and maybe even starting to become a qualified number one for a championship team. So Jaylen Brown's going to be on the number 11 spot on my list.
All right, so that's going to wrap it up. We'll just go through our rankings here, just in all in one go, just to reiterate, summarize. So, number 20, I have Scotty Barnes, Jalen Johnson at 19, Kevin Durant at 18, LeBron James at 17, Karl Anthony Towns at 16, Tyrese Halliburton at 15, 14, Tyrese Maxey, 13, Jaylen Brown, 12, Kawhi Leonard, and 11, Steph Curry.
All right. So at my 20 spot, I have Denny Avdia. My 19 spot, I got Kevin Durant. 18, LeBron James. 17, Scotty Barnes. 16, Karl Anthony Towns. 15, Tyrese Maxey. 14, Devin Booker. 13, Donovan Mitchell. 12, Kawhi Leonard. And then 11, Jaylen Brown.
I guess it's going to wrap up our rankings for today. Just comment down if you would have some players ranked differently, who you think is going to be in the top 10, stuff like that. And we'll be back next episode with our final top 10 rankings of who's the best in the league going into next season.